are so pleased to see all of you. Would you stand as you are able and remain standing through the Pledge of Allegiance, through the Pledge to the Texas flag. The invocation will be led by Honorary Regent Martha Hartzog, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance by Debbie Pelfrey. I would like to introduce our honored guests with us today. We are so grateful to have Honorary President General Lynn Forney Young, 2013 to 2016, that she could be here today. Thank you very much. Mrs. Young's great aunt, Paralee Parrish, was Austin Colony's organizing regent, and she will be speaking a bit later in our program today about Mrs. Parrish. I would like to introduce our state officers in attendance. Please hold your applause until all have been introduced. State Organizing Secretary, Susan Johnston. State Registrar, Susan Adams. State Historian, Betty Berg. State Librarian, Paula Olber. Please greet your state officers.
Be it known that as whereas the Austin Colony Chapter, National Society Daughters of the American Revolution, was organized April 22, 1952, at the home of Ina May Ogletree McAdams, under the leadership of organizing regent Paralee Parrish, whereas the chapter was named for Stephen F. Austin, who established the first Anglo-American settlement in Mexican-owned Texas, and whereas the chapter has served as a vibrant community for the women of Austin, growing many long-standing friendships and a tradition of service. And whereas the Austin Colony Chapter, NSDAR, is proud to have carried out the DAR's mission of promoting historic preservation, education, and patriotism, honoring the patriots of the American Revolution in the greater Austin area for the past 70 years. Now, therefore, I, Steve Adler, Mayor of the City of Austin, Texas, do hereby proclaim April 22, 2022 as Austin Colony Chapter NSDAR Day.
Thank you, Missy. Who served an amazing 4 terms as regent and led the revitalization of the chapter. Today, the chapter is thriving more than ever, with a 28% increase in membership last year and a 6% increase so far in 2022. And our newest member, Rachel Henley, verified on Thursday, is in attendance today. In addition, we were recently notified that we have been named one of the top 5 NSDAR chapters that had the highest chapter achievement points for 2021.
It is a pleasure to be here with my Austin Colony sisters, and indeed a pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Lynn Forney Young. I first met Lynn Young as a 6-year-old about 34 years ago when I attended my first CAR meeting with my grandmother. Lynn at that time served as senior state president for the Texas Society Children of the American Revolution. She remembers me as a little girl wearing a navy blue sailor dress, and all these years now, here we are. I look a little bit older. She does not. And actually, I am standing here today as a member of Austin Colony because of Lynn Young. When I moved to Austin in 2005 to work at the Capitol, started looking for a chapter, and I was having trouble deciding what Austin chapter to join. My great aunt was a member of the Balcones chapter. My boss at the time was a member of the Thankful Hubbard chapter. I had a good friend in Andrew Carruthers chapter. And then Lynn Young, who was state regent of the Texas DAR at that time, said, I think you should give Austin Colony a thought. And so lo and behold, I joined, and a couple of months later was first vice regent, and then served 6 years as chapter regent. And I'm not sure I should have listened to her, but I did. So Lynn joined the DAR in 1977 at the height of the surge of patriotism at the bicentennial. Obviously, she knew that family had been in DAR, her great aunt being the organizing regent of this chapter. She dove right in, joining the Tejas chapter. She met her DAR bestie, Paging, at Continental Congress as a potluck roommate, and that was Mindy Kameyer, who also has a direct connection to Austin Colony, as her aunt was Miriam Ma Ferguson. And so I just love that the two of them were destined to be friends, and they served alongside each other. They were executive officers together during the Young administration even. So Lynn is the only Texas daughter, to have the triple crown of serving as state OJ, state conference, outstanding conference page, and outstanding chapter regent, an award we don't even present anymore, and so therefore she'll always be the only one. Now, when she served as state regent, there are a couple of firsts that you need to know about that. So first, she was our first state regent to have a beautiful custom pin that we come and know to wear. Hers was an eagle with a shield. She really likes eagles, you'll see. And it was beautiful. And her project was to coin the phrase today's DAR and create the wonderful promotional video. If you've taken any of the membership courses, you have watched that video, or if you've even spent a lot of time navigating the DAR website, you have seen portions of that video. Our own Nancy Daniels, at that time a Hollywood chapter member, but she also had some strong encouragement from Lynn and his Austin Colony chapter too, is featured in that video. So another Austin Colony connection. Now, she also has an extreme dedication for fundraising. People talk a lot about a famous bull riding incident, but she also trusted daughters, Texas daughters specifically, to name her as a grandmother. That was probably her first time to put her hands in the Texas daughters for fundraising efforts. So that's how she became a honey, with now her 3 grandchildren. So you do know that she was the first President General from Texas. She was not our first candidate. She was actually the 3rd candidate from Texas. So it took us a couple of tries before we got it. And, here in a few weeks, we may have our 4th, which is exciting how Lynn got the ball rolling on that. So we'll see more Texas daughters serving in that. Now, being President General comes with a lot of opportunities. You get to travel the world. You get to meet daughters. There's a lot of experiences. I had the privilege of paging for her when she was President General. And so, I asked her a couple of times what was the best part. She said, hands down, meeting the Queen of England was one of the once-in-a-lifetime opportunities. And I'll tell you my thoughts on that, because she posted the photo on April 1st. So I thought it was the most elaborate April Fool's ever planned, because why would the President General of the Daughters of the American Revolution be meeting the Queen of England? But it was not a trick, it was actually for real. And she even has a little solar-powered bobblehead of the Queen, and as it gets sunnier, she just waves more, and it provides hours of entertainment. Another highlight would be the Guinness Book of World Records that we achieved in her final year of her administration, where we wrote the most letters to active duty military in 1 month. And the boxes and the boxes of collection, and seeing her eyes when they told the amount, and I can't remember now, but it was pretty amazing. So after her service as President General, the 250 Commission was created, an act of Congress, and we can all appreciate, how hard it is to get Congress to do a lot. So the fact that it was an act of Congress, and she has been named a commissioner to the Semi-Bicentennial Commission, where they held their first meeting in an Independence Hall. And she got to sit and take in where our founding fathers created the Declaration of Independence. And that's where they first gathered, which I think is just one of the most, that has to be a highlight of that experience so far, because there's still many experiences to come with that. So after her service as President General, she traded in city life for ranch life. Having spent most of her adult life in Houston, she now lives in Milam County with her husband, Steve. Some of her loves are George Strait, Ferragamo shoes, and sitting on the back porch of her house looking at the sunset. And so it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Lynn Forney-Young.
Thank you, Jamie. I was holding my breath there for just a minute. I thought sure you're going to get into the bull riding, and thank you for not mentioning that. Thank you all. It is a delight to be here at the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center celebrating Austin Colony's 70th anniversary. I have never been to the Wildflower Center, and it is stunning. And I can't help but think about the time about 20 years ago when Martha Hartzog said we should honor Lady Bird Johnson. And so the Austin Colony chapter presented her with the National Medal of Honor for her work in conservation. And we were invited to, thanks to Hessie Owen, we were invited to Mrs. Johnson's house to present it to her. And I believe the picture is up there of all of so. And Eloise Ramp, our honorary state regent, is also related to one of the charter members of Austin Colony chapter, because we were all here for the 50th anniversary. So Eloise came in, and Hessie was there, and Martha was there. It was just a really small group in the house with Mrs. Johnson, and she was charming. She'd had her stroke by then, so she didn't speak to us, but she communicated in many, many ways. She was just charming and gracious. And wouldn't you know it, the door opened, and out came Linda Bird Johnson carrying a tray of Mother's cookies and an iced tea. And she was so engaged. We just had an amazing time, and thanks to Martha Hartzog and the Austin Colony chapter. So thank you for another fantastic memory. And I love it as I'm looking at this beautiful portrait over here in the blue bonnets. So thank you so much. And I thank you for the opportunity to once again share this story of my great aunt, the organizing regent, Paralee Parrish. Are you familiar with the poem, We Are the Chosen? The author is unknown, but it says, in each family there is one who seems called to find the ancestors, to put flesh on their bones and make them live again, to tell the family story and feel that somehow they know and approve. Well, today I'm going to try to put flesh on the bones of Paralee by sharing some personal information about her service in World War I and about her as an individual. I honestly have no recollection of ever meeting Paralee. But her youngest sister, Rosalie, charged me years ago, who had no children. So neither Paralee nor Rosalie had children. And Rosalie being the last to survive, she one day loaded up and we were visiting, and she said, here. And she handed me all these boxes and said, you are now the family historian. I was designated this Thursday. And I've taken it very seriously, and I still have all those boxes and many, many more boxes. So Paralee Ardith Parrish was born in Shreveport, Louisiana in late 1888 and was the second of 4 daughters. And there's a portrait of the 4 girls there. Sadly, they had a younger brother, but he died very young. And so I'll go right ahead and share the family skeleton since I'm here among friends. Her father abandoned the family when the girls were young. So in about the year 1900, my grandmother was 10 years old. She was the third of the 4. And by then, according to the 1900 census, he had another child born the same year in Texas. I'm not sure what he did for a living, but he apparently was able to travel. So he abandoned when the girls were young. He moved to Texas without bothering to divorce my great-grandmother and remarried. Now, apparently the next wife was not aware of his current family history. In fact, 3 of the girls never forgave him. And my grandmother was the exception. She spent years trying to track him down. If you can just imagine his surprise when she finally located him and drove up to his house in East Texas. You know, he's out there in the yard with the kids, the wife, and all that stuff. And she said, she got out of the car, 2 little bitty boys, and said, Daddy. Now, don't you know that was a conversation? Well, as I said, Paralee never forgave him. She even changed the spelling of Parrish. She added an R. And on her passport to go to France for World War I, she listed a completely different last name. His name was Alexander Parrish, not the one that we won't refer to now. So my grandmother, as I said, she forgave him. She surprised him. And I found a letter not long ago that my grandmother had written to Paralee. Again, among these boxes, I have all the carbon copies and his handwritten notes. And it was, Daddy was so sweet. Just before he died, he told me he had a set of twins in Lafayette. So I believe my pool of cousins has just expanded. Paralee wound up attending the Bellevue School of Nursing in New York City. It was the first school to initiate the enrollment of nurses for the base hospital number 1 in France. It was in Rie-Oranges, which I'm sure I butchered. She completed her training and departed for Europe on April 14, 1917, and she began her diary that very day. The diary is on the table as well. She was 28 years old. More than 22,000 nurses were recruited by the American Red Cross to serve in the Army between 1917 and 1919. 10,000 served near the Western Front. The hospital was moved to Jouy, northeast of Paris, in June of 1918 due to the advance of the Germans. The staff was reduced, and Pearlie was sent to the Red Cross headquarters in Paris. In August of 1918, the Shreveport Times wrote that Miss Pearlie Parrish of Shreveport, a member of the Red Cross Nursing Service abroad, has been decorated by the French government for distinguished service, according to a recent letter to her mother. By October of 1918, she was headed to the new assignment at Toul. And her diary states, Mademoiselle McHugh and I are leaving tomorrow morning for number 114. That was the base hospital, number 114, out of Toul. October 2nd, Toul. Our train was frightfully crowded, and we gave 3 second lieutenants seats in our compartment. They would have had to stand all the way to Toul. Now, Toul is near the Alsace-Lorraine area and was very, very busy during World War I. Originally, it was a Red Cross hospital, and then it was taken over by the Army on November 1st, 1918, as an evacuation hospital. It was located near the Western Front, and her diary has page after page after page of her entries about treating the mustard gas patients. Tuesday, October 2nd. Arrived here at 4:30 yesterday, found them in desperate need of help. Over 1,100 gassed and wounded, and only 20 nurses. Wednesday, October 3rd, was taken up to a room that had the card of Miss Nina L. Seymour on the door there and personal effects of Miss Seymour all about. I occupy the other half of the room, wondering what Miss S. will be like when I see her. She is tall, she's dark, she's graceful, good parts, I say, and dressing well by glancing at her personal belongings. Wednesday, October 3rd, unpacked, dressed to duty at 6 p.m., night duty in Section D, medical, surgical, gassed. 175 badly gassed, horribly burned, and cruelly maimed, and among them 4 wounded German prisoners under guard. I did not have time to give even a glance at the Germans all night because our own boys were in such need and suffered so horribly. I am so tired, my body aches, but my mind refuses to sleep until this is done. Midnight at supper, someone asked, "How is Miss Seymour?" "Miss who?" I nearly interrupted. When the answer came, "Oh, she is no better. She's awfully ill." And here it was disclosed to me that the girl whose room I shared was dying of pneumonia. She was on duty with a whole section of pneumonia cases on duty alone and became so tired that it's supposed she lost all resistance power and succumbed. There was no relief for her. A letter was written to Miss Seymour's mother. She was buried in a casket made by our boys. The casket was draped with American flags. She was buried at Justice Hospital Group Cemetery, grave number 398. She has the honor of being the first American woman buried in this cemetery. She's lying side by side with brave boys. My, what an honor she has won for herself and our country. Although her work was short, she's made hundreds of wounded and sick boys comfortable. Her body was accompanied to the grave by the chaplains, the nurses, Colonel Burnham, and soldiers. And after short prayers, a bugler found a taps. It was hard to leave her there. But when one thinks what a grand cause she gave her life for, one almost envies her, that is if God sees fit to end their toil. During World War I, over 200 Army and 36 Navy nurses died while in service, and nearly 300 Red Cross nurses also lost their lives. Friday, November 8th, tired all day. Took charge of Section E today. Oh, heaven give me strength. A whole squad of FA, of 19 FA, which is forward advanced, gassed, horribly so, and dying. All gassed on Tuesday the 6th. This gas seems to have been the most awful invention of the world. For every crown, medal, or any glory a wounded soldier gets, the gas one deserves too. If he dies the death of all horrors. And if he lives on far less than any human being should expect it to do in the way of respiratory equipment. Sunday, November 10th, one died today. They are suffering so greatly. We are so helpless. It's a blue Sunday. Monday, November 11th, Sergeant von Sprucken died at 9:15 last night. That name may have come from Germany, but it came in this person from America to fight Germany. Monday, November 11th, in large handwriting, the armistice is signed. Sunday, December 22nd, walked, I'm sure, 1,700 miles yesterday to the Russian prison camp. Took them bread, jam, cigarettes, tobacco, and they were like a crowd of hungry wolves. Got many souvenirs. Thursday, February 6, 1918, arrived New York. And her diary ends with that notation. Among Paraly's possessions are the Victory Medal and the Battle of Verdun Medal. The Shreveport paper reported she was a frequent speaker about her experiences. On her shoulder, she wore her battalion insignia, the Cross of Lorraine, in crimson above the letters AS, surrounded by a crimson circle. This signified that Miss Parrish had served with the advanced section in Lorraine. On her arm at the wrist, there were 3 gold service stripes with the star above. This told the story of 18 months of active service abroad, and that Miss Parrish went over with the first 15,000. Her speaking notes include a vacation to Nice, trips to Paris and Versailles, the bombing of Paris, long-range guns, the first American patient, and ambulance trains. Regarding tools, she spoke about the optimistic patient, the dark patients, the German prisoners, and the armistice. When promoting the Victory Loan Drive, she said, "For our boys did suffer. I can relate instance after instance of the most harrowing kind of suffering, of men broken, shattered, and wounded, battling for their country. Yet through all their suffering, they were brave. There were no braver men in all of the armies fighting for freedom than the men of America." Now, after returning to Shreveport, she worked as a nurse trainer at the Red Cross. She married briefly and then resumed her married name after the divorce. Paralee joined the Shreveport chapter, DAR, in 1934, and she prepared the papers for all 3 of her sisters as well as her mother. She eventually settled in Austin and ran a boarding school or boarding house on San Antonio Street for female students at UT. And she was a member of the Thankful Hubbard chapter. She was a professional genealogist and organized the Austin Colony chapter, as you know, in 1952. And as you heard, one of our more notable members was Ma Ferguson. Now, I understand that Texas DAR had a policy then. Now, maybe incorrect, but that when a chapter got to be 100 members, that you were encouraged to spin off other chapters and create new chapters. So perhaps that is why she left and organized the new chapter. But that would presume mean that Thankful Hubbard could be a Lantern chapter as well. A copy of her diary is at the Briscoe Center for American History. She had a sketchbook with drawings done by her patients, and many of the captions over there are in French. There's an artillery shell that she brought back, one of 2, and it was dated October 1917. I hope when I get to heaven, I can meet her and thank her for her service and for doing the family genealogy. If it were not for Paralee, I would not have had the honor of being a member for 45 years. She was a good ancestor indeed, and it's a privilege to be the chosen one. And I have no doubt she would be extremely proud of all the ways in which the Austin Colony chapter has served God, home, and country for 70 years. Thank you for allowing me to put flesh on her bones.
Thank you, Mrs. Young. That was fascinating and such a pleasure to hear more about Paralee Parrish for so many of us that never had the opportunity to meet her. The chapter will be making a contribution in your name to the President's General Project. We're thanking you for speaking today. At this time, would Chapter Conservation Chair Donna Segal please come forward to introduce the NSDAR Conservation Award.
Thank you. Those of us who are longtime members of DAR, and even those who've just become a member of this great daughtership, realize that it's people like Paralee Parrish and Lynn Forney Young who are so remarkable, who are the keepers of the flame, who are the keepers of the history, that continue to make us dedicated daughters. It gives me enormous pleasure to introduce our recipient today of the DAR Conservation Award. The soft-spoken, indomitable godmother of Austin's green movement. That's the headline of an article about Mary Arnold, written by well-known columnist for the Austin Statesman, Michael Barnes. The article continues. Pretend that you are at a public hearing and you are a public official. A polite woman who speaks clearly and carefully takes the microphone. Within moments, you realize that Mary Arnold is no ordinary activist. Her tone is even, her manners mild, and her eyes are radiant. At the same time, her command of the facts is absolute. Her will is steadfast, and her arguments are as clear as a summer morning in the high hill country. Do you want to get a good picture of that? Close up, perhaps.
Thank you all very, very much. One of the things that Martha said didn't refer to me, but it referred to another of our esteemed members from the past, Roberta Crenshaw. And that's the part about the amusement park on Town Lake. Roberta got that one shut down. And it has been such a pleasure and very meaningful to be a member of this wonderful group. A neighbor of mine suggested that I should start going to the meetings and become a member. And that's when I met Martha after coming to my first gathering. And it has truly been a wonderful education, and how many wonderful people contribute to what we all can do for our nation and for our local communities, for our friends and neighbors, for everybody. So thank you all very, very much.
She's a hero of mine.